We have some training footage of a gunfight between a church security team and an active shooter during Sunday services. And the question we keep getting is this: as a private citizen who is carrying concealed, are you legally justified to shoot the active shooter when they are engaged with the church security team, meaning you are not technically the target of the active shooter at that moment? We're going to break down this question and footage with top criminal defense attorney and former state prosecutor Tom Grieve. But first, a quick reminder. Before we get into the video, there are 2 free bonuses you can get right now when you join the USCCA, but they end really soon. You can get this great survival kit and a Pelican handgun case. All you need to do is click the link in the description to learn more. Now, Tom, I'm going to roll this video clip right here, and we're going to talk about an active shooter in a church setting, and the question is, are you justified in using deadly force if you are not the intended target of the active shooter? So we see some people coming in, and we're trying to teach the congregants and the members of the security team what to be watching for during an active shooter and what to do. So here comes our bad guy. I probably shouldn't give this away, but once he starts shooting, you will see the crowd just scatter. And obviously we want people to move and get to cover, but who should be engaging with this guy and trying to take him out to stop the threat? We shouldn't say take him out. That sounds like we're going on a date. We want to stop the threat. Now there we have the security officer shooting back at him. Could anybody at any time be engaging this active shooter, even though you're not the target of the attack?
So most states, or every state to my knowledge, has some sort of defensive other or defensive third person, right? And because the scenario that we're asking here fundamentally is this person is not an immediate threat to you because presumably they're shooting at someone else. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that that makes that person safe for you, right? Because he's attacking random bystanders and so forth. So I'm not going to immediately just set sail on the fact that there's no self-defense here. But let's just set that aside for a moment, because I understand that's probably not really the question here. The question here is, let's imagine that, hey, that person's just there to get that person or whatever else, right? Yeah, so there are defensive third person aspects. In other words, if you can articulate that according to whatever your state's exact legal formulation of self-defense is, generally speaking, if you're in reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm, or in our case, because we're talking about a third person, was that person the intended victim of the shooter in reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm? And the answer is yes, and if you can intervene on their behalf, then provided that you're engaging with the actual attacker, and it's not like, they tried to get away or anything like that, and we're in a different set of circumstances now, then yes, there is going to be a defensive third person that's going to be present. Those arguments are going to be available to you, and it's going to be up to you as to whether or not you want to go down that road, of course. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't. Generally speaking, protecting human life, good. But sometimes things, unless you were there from the very start of the confrontation, who's to say that you don't have your attacker and your victim mixed up? I mean, there's any number of different scenarios here that could throw you for a real legal ride.
That was going to be my next question. Yes, it's legal. Okay, we can assume that you're intervening to put an end to a threat, to stop the threat of imminent death or great bodily harm. But should you? And there's lots more information that you have to have before you jump into that legal meat grinder of pulling out your gun and shooting. And there's also some tactical questions that people need to answer. If you're in church with your family, do you need to get your family to safety or make sure that they are seeking cover or moving or getting toward an exit? Or do you need to pull out your gun and engage a shooter? And that's going to be a personal question that we can't answer for every single person right here, right now. But again, let's maybe talk a little bit, or have you talk a little bit about the should you portion of doing this, because if you pull out your gun and start shooting, you open up an entirely different set of legal consequences, not just the tactical consequences of getting hurt. Maybe he turns and starts shooting in your direction now, but the legal consequences as well.
Right. I mean, look, if you're shooting at the wrong guy, right? So in other words, bad guy comes in with a knife, good guy pulls out a concealed carry gun, and they kind of get into I'm hiding behind this, I'm hiding behind that. If you just walk into a church, your first time there, you don't know who's the stranger, you don't know who's the bad guy. Are you going to identify the right person? Mm-hmm. what happens if, a member from the church security team, if they're organized and prepared enough to have one, if they produce a firearm, do you know that that's another good guy or another bad guy? So there's going to be a lot of calculations and a lot of rolls of the dice that, many times it's going to be obvious who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. But other times it's not going to be. And not only do you risk in those scenarios taking an innocent life, but you also risk effectively losing yours both physically because, okay, you shot the good guy, now the bad guy turns around and shoots you, and also legally because, hey, you shot the good guy. Bad guy gets neutralized by someone else, and now you're the one who's going to go to prison for the rest of your life and not seeing your family and so forth. So just understand that if you're not in possession of all the facts, there's always a degree of legal risk, but you're opening up, that crack turns into a wide open door at a certain point. And you're going to have to make that decision of what are you willing to do? What kind of risk is going to be acceptable? And I'm not saying that to try to talk people in or out of anything. I'm saying that to try to get people's minds turning on these issues so that they can try to think about this ahead of time. And you brought up a great point of if you've got family, kids there, do you want to get them out first before you do something? Or are you going to move away from them before you engage to try to, draw fire away from them? I mean, these are all things you need to be thinking about.
Yeah, there's 1,000 questions, and to answer the original one, yes, it might be legal, but now is it advisable? And that's an entirely different can of worms. We could probably spend hours talking about it, or page after page in Concealed Carry Magazine talking about it.